Welcome to the Slaughtered Sheep podcast. I'm your host, Matt Daly of MRD Consulting, and you are listening to the Lion series in the Slaughtered Sheep podcast. The Lion series showcases small business owners that have transformed themselves from small business sheep to small business lions by navigating the epic risks and dangers of owning and operating a small business. Not only have these business owners survived, they have thrived and stood out in competitive markets, reeled in top-notch talent to achieve their goals, and have led their teams through the daily challenges of business ownership. Today, we focus on the website and social media marketing industry in the form of a young man named Ben Theis. Ben is the owner of SKOL Marketing, operating out of Hopkins, Minnesota. SKOL specializes in web development, search engine optimization, and social media management. SKOL has a 5-star rating on 165 Google reviews, which is almost unprecedented. I have been a client of SKOL for about 5 years, and I cannot say enough about the technical expertise, level of customer service, and friendly atmosphere that emanates from this company. Whether it's website development, social media marketing, ADA or PCI compliance, or any other technical issue that I've had to deal with, the employees of SKOL have been second to none. SKOL is a very responsive group, very friendly, and most important, they are very technical and proficient in their craft. Organizations are run from the top down, and Ben's fingerprints are all over the excellence that emanates throughout this company. With that being said, with no further ado, I'd like to introduce the man himself, the owner and founder of SKOL Marketing, Mr. Ben Theis. Welcome, Ben.
Hey, Matt. Welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for tolerating me butchering your name here in the redacted portion of this. I will never mispronounce your name again.
There we go.
It's a fantastic name. So Ben, welcome to the show, and it's absolutely an honor to have you here. And I've watched you grow up right before my eyes here, and it's been fun to see the success of your firm and absolutely fantastic brand that you have, reputation, second to none.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
You have been tagged as a lion by the Slaughtered Sheep Podcast Board of Directors. Through months of grueling and unapologetic vetting, you have been bestowed this honor. So how does it feel?
It honestly feels great. I love what you're doing here, and I love what this podcast is meant to do and really shine a light on the people involved, obviously the processes, the struggles, the triumphs, and just from that type of lens. So it's really unique, and yeah, I love it.
Ben, the Slaughtered Sheep Podcast couldn't exist without lions such as yourself volunteering to come on, and you've got quite a story to tell. As with any successful entrepreneur, amongst all the trophies, there's scars, and this is really what we want to hear. We want to see these scars, the wars that you have fought and survived, because getting to where you are today is not easy, and there's no way that it couldn't have been done without navigating the wolves, as so to speak. Before we get into your background on SKOL, how you built the company, first we want to know about Ben. We want to know about Ben Theis. We want to know about where you grew up, what you were like as a kid, where you went to school. So give us a feeling of this budding entrepreneur as a young Ben.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chaska, Minnesota. So I've had one brother. He unfortunately passed away about 10 years ago now, but it was him and I growing up. And so and we're 13 months apart. So that's why I always say that, because so super close, always did all this kind of stuff together. So grew up, my parents divorced when I was really young. So going back and forth, like a lot of people in today's world have dealt with. And the reason I just say that is when you sometimes go through that stuff, just like anybody trying to find yourself, is I always gravitated honestly towards kind of sales. So like during school, I actually set records for selling the most candy bars, selling the wrapping paper. And what I really think really came down to, one is my extended family on both sides, my dad and my mom's side, were both entrepreneurial. And so it was always cool watching them grow up and being able to create something that was their own. And I always really attributed to that. So that was always instilled in me, and I was very passionate. So the reason I just mentioned that is everything that I do kind of 110%. For me, diehard Vikings fan, quote unquote, obsessed. And so I go 110 kind of percent into that when for projects, school projects, hobbies, trying to learn new skills, it was always going in at kind of 110%. And of course, there's some pros and cons to that. And as well, it's great for being able to have all that passion. Just takes a lot of time and obviously having to deal with, talk about some of the scars when you have those expectations and you do that. So that was always instilled in growing up, but always loved growing up in the west suburbs of Minnesota. I say like a lot of the stuff is clear as classic Minnesotans of Minnesota sports, Minnesota outdoors, Minnesota nice, the seasons, the winters, the springs, the summers, all of that kind of stuff. So I always say I had a great childhood, had a great kind of upbringing, really liked it, graduated from high school in Chaska, and then I went to college. And so during college, I tell people I had a little bit of a different experience than most. So I actually commuted from Chaska to Mankato. And so I went to school full time. I worked 35 hours a week at Walgreens, and then I also had a 20-hour week internship on top of that. So I approached college a little bit like a job, talking about that 110 kind of percent going all in. And so I just stacked this and just went really in. Now, again, very blessed. It did set me up for success. Didn't have quite some of the other quote unquote fun or stories that people might have had in their classic college experiences, but very grateful and thankful for my kind of college experience that I did. And so that was really fun and everything for me. Not gonna lie, you talk about some of the scars, the stresses and everything overcoming, but it really did teach me a lot and was able to set myself up with some really unique kind of opportunities. And really, it was always going after things that some people said maybe you couldn't or it was going to be hard. Like one of my other biggest, most fun things is being a diehard Vikings fan. I actually got to work for the Vikings at Winter Park when I was 17, 18. Nice. And so honestly, the dream job of Ben Theis being a teenager, going through that, it was really cool. I was hired to only work 2 weeks during the summer as they were redoing the fields. And I worked so well and I performed so well that they actually ended up letting the other guy go and then end up hiring me as his kind of replacement. So it was a unique thing. Fell in love with it. So just a little bit more about me too is I'm married. We're going on 9 years right now. We don't have kids, but we have 3 fur babies. So we have 2 pet pugs, Mango and Rigby, and we actually have a pet mini pig named SKOL.
Wow, so that is too cool. Very nice.
So yeah,
the old pet pig trend is trending upwards big time. I've heard they're very intelligent animals.
Oh, it's almost he's too smart for his own good. We've had to baby-proof the whole thing. So it's literally having a toddler nonstop. So like they're smart, but he goes outside, he does tricks, he snuggles,
and how
he oinks
big is he?
So he's a little less than 100 pounds, but that's like the size of a 45-pound dog. So he holds his weight very dense. I like to say he holds his weight like his dad does. You know what I mean? Right here. So
just solid, as a rock. For those that can't see here, it's Ben's physique is imposing.
Oh yeah, I
it's
wish.
Intimidating.
Yeah, I wish.
But Ben, listen, I just want to say thank you for sharing a very fascinating childhood. What I'm picking up listening to you is I'm just picking up a blazing ball of energy. I think if someone were to say, who is Ben Theis? Who was he as a young boy, as a teenager, as a college student? Energy, work ethic, enthusiasm, off the charts. I can feel it here as we're talking. So I grew up in a divorced family. Had that challenge, you know, the 2 Christmases and the 2 Thanksgivings and the whole 9 yards. And yeah, like you, I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to let that haunt me and crush me or just get to know these various people that were in my life and try to make the best of it. And the passing of your brother. And I got to tell you, there's no doubt, I know you have scars because you never would have got here without them. But I'll tell you, Ben, you don't wear them.
Thank you.
You don't wear them outwardly, and you come across as a very genuine person, and so it's good. We really appreciate this because one of the challenges that I'm going to have on this podcast is being brutally honest with these listeners about small business ownership. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years, like you. I always knew I wanted to own my own business. I just never imagined ever being an employee for the rest of my life. But the listeners need to know that your background really shapes you. There's a lot of telltale signs with people that are entrepreneurs and business owners that occurred in childhood. And I think listeners need to go back through memory lane and decipher, did my upbringing, did my education really prepare me for this? And if not, What do I have to do?
And it doesn't have to stop there. Like I said, if you didn't have that, you're always growing. You're always and having things morph you. Going back, so my brother passed away when I was about going on 10 years ago. But I'm saying that was like when I was 26, even through 26. And you say you're going through scars now in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. I think that's just a really cool point of it's always building and always shaping and redirecting you no matter what.
The wolves never go away. And even if you don't get devoured, you're going to get bit. I'm 57. I've been an entrepreneur for 30 years. I get bit every week, every month. Sometimes it's just a little bite on the ankle. Sometimes it's a chunk. This is phenomenal. I appreciate the backdrop on this. So let's dig into SKOL.
Yeah.
You've got quite a company here. I can testify just from my interaction as a client. So give us the background on how SKOL came to be. And just at what point in time that you knew that you were going to be good at this and good enough to form a company, to lead and train employees, and to manage a substantial client base? How did this happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey, like you said, too, is it's also learning some of that stuff, confidence in yourself. But I think one of the points you talked about, too, is I've always been a pretty confident kind of person in knowing that because I know what I can do. Yep. But in order to build a company or to really build anything, you've got to rely on other people. So it's also that type of skill. So SKOL Marketing derived from going beyond kind of the childhood and stuff like that so I was hired by Google before I started SKOL Marketing. I believe I was 22 or 23 when I was hired at Google. I actually ended up being the youngest manager at Google. It was funny because I actually had to send in my identification and paperwork twice because they thought there was a misprint because they thought I was older, which I took as a compliment. Funny. But the reason I bring that up is that really started two things for me. One is I had always known marketing and making the digital aspect, being younger, you throw out a computer, you try to figure something out. But two things that it did there. One was obviously the learning opportunity I was able to get at Google. Obviously, there's no bigger player in digital marketing than Google. So to really be in the tribe and behind the scenes and stuff like that was a phenomenal opportunity. I'm very blessed and very thankful for it to this day. And then the other thing too is, so I was hired at that age with really peer managerial experience. Before that, I'd worked at a sports management company and we'd done events. So of course I'd had something like that. Before I went to Mankato, I went to Normandale and I actually restarted a football team. So the Normandale Lions, they had been dormant for I think like 25 years.
You're kidding me.
And I started as a club team. I fundraised, I got equipment, I put together a coaching staff, we put together players, and we actually ended up playing other teams. And then it got too big, and then the insurance people at the college found out. But just talking about that and looking at that is I never really had like people managerial kind of thing. I bring that up is because then I was really thrown into it, and I had to hire 4 people on the Google team and then fully manage them. And all 4 people ended up being older than me, which just, especially at that age, was just a very unique kind of dynamic. And honestly, intimidating, learning, just all of those things, because I feel like when you're a first-time manager, you just see things a lot of times your way, or also in the sense of sometimes you would just do that thing or not have to be told it, but sometimes you're put in a position where it's not telling people what to do, but it's leading them through it. Correct. And there's a certain way to communicate that expectations and gaining respect and all that kind of stuff. So I really think that SKOL Marketing really started within that experience with Google and growing from there. While I was at Google, I also became a certified Google speaker, and I traveled the country giving presentations. And so I'd always loved talking to people, and I really came into my own and being able to do presentations, doing my own style. Like you talked about, I talk fast, I move fast, a lot of high energy. And it was unique because it was a little bit different than a lot of times people had seen, especially in the tech realm and stuff like that. So I brought a little bit of a different flavor. And so we would go to some of these towns, and the joke was always that if we were behind on time, we'll send Ben in because he'll get us, he'll make up the time. We got our ace in the hole here. Yeah, just go. Yeah. And he'll make up the time. So it was always really fun, but I loved it. I traveled a lot there, learned a lot. What ended up happening was we had state teams. So we were responsible, pretty much putting a face to Google and being responsible for Minnesota. So we'd work with small mom and pop businesses. At that point, it's funny, even telling them why it was important to have an online presence or even be online. That's how long ago sometimes it feels. But then working all the way up to the Targets, the Vikings, the Mall of America, these bigger companies that were here, and helping them with larger relationships might be Google Maps. Like Mall of America, you can imagine going on Google Maps and how many things are changing and all that kind of stuff. And so it was working with some cool things there, the Children's Hospital, all these other kind of stuff. So we had kind of state teams. What ended up happening, though, about a couple years into it is they decided to condense them into regional teams because we didn't have a quote-unquote Google office here. We just had a normal office, not like the one ones in the movies or the TV shows.
Yeah.
But Chicago did. And so the idea was they were going to put the Midwest into Chicago. At that point, my job was actually going to go to San Francisco. I was offered a different opportunity. And at that point, even just my life, my age and everything, I just didn't want to move. I really loved what I was doing. But even when I went back to the Vikings I never really chased the name of the company. I always wanted to do the job. And so what I mean by that is like when I was with the Vikings, I was let go because they made my position into 3 internships. One person had offered me when I was at the Vikings, say, hey, I can pick up the phone and do you want a position with the Kansas City Chiefs? And for me, it wasn't just chasing working in professional sports. I just loved what I was doing at that moment with the Vikings. Same thing again with Google. It's like I could have chased and gone to Silicon Valley and done that, but I loved what I was doing here. And yes, it was cool that I worked with Google, but I loved actually what I was doing more so than just the name on it, so to speak.
Dealing with the local businesses.
Correct. And again, in your community and doing that. And I honestly thought, not going to lie too, is knowing from a business and a marketing kind of standpoint that I thought I had an opportunity here, knowing that there was a differentiating factor. Full transparency, if I went to California, Silicon Valley, there's a lot of Midwesterners that have gone to California and you become one of the just run-of-the-mill, become a sheep potentially.
It's a big pond out there.
Correct.
It's a very big pond.
And there's not too many here the other way. So the tipping factor of where SKOL Marketing exactly came from, I can really remember it was 2 big presentations that I did at Google. Is at the end of each one of those, I had several people come up and I'd always gotten this, hey, Ben, great job, thank you, all that kind of stuff. But there were 2 people at each one of these presentations that they came up to me and said, hey, Ben, thank you for breaking this down and making me realize why I need to be on here. But I don't have the time or the desire. Can I just hire you to do it now?
Funny.
And so I had that 2 presentations back to back and multiple people had asked me that. And it got me thinking that, because even at that point too, and you still see it somewhat now, but really it's gone down, is there used to be like this whole notion that if you had knowledge, you had to lock it down, you had to monetize it, you had to do that. What I saw, which is really what's happened, is that information should be free and knowledge should be out there because it benefits everybody. And realistically, at the end of the day, a lot of people just want to know what's going on or what's going there, but they don't want to know how to necessarily do it. Or they may not have the resource there. Some might there, but again, really where I'm going with that is that I realize that if you taught people or you explain to people what you're actually doing, the importance of it, the majority of people go, okay, great, now I do that. I'll just hire you to do it because I know you know what you're doing there. I compared to, I could go build a bathroom in my basement. The Books for Dummies, look on YouTube. But most people are probably going to hire a professional, but they want to know what's going on because you probably have to maintain your bathroom then or something like that. So it's the same kind of concept. So I had that in the back of my mind that, okay, this really does work. If you aren't afraid to open up the knowledge that you have and be a resource for someone and not try to clamp it all, just keep it all your own. So that's really where it came. So when they notified us, it was that. And the biggest boost is actually from my SKOL Marketing business partner, Marty. He's the one that really, I had thought about it, but even at that age, I'm not going to lie, like I had confidence in myself, but you still second guess. I was already the youngest manager at Google. Yeah, that's cool, but you're still young and all this other kind of stuff. And you did have some of those scars and bumps and bruises from being a leader and being thrown out there at baptism by fire. But I was very thankful because Marty really pushed me. And I just remember sitting there one day and he's, if anybody can do it, you can. And so I don't know why you wouldn't try it. And I was like, okay. And so it was a really, honestly, very thankful to this day. And so that's when I decided to go off. And so I just was like, and so I was thinking I had a differentiating factor here to say, hey, I worked for Google. What I ended up doing too, and I realized too, is Google was pulling out of Minnesota really because we were going to regional teams. And so I really thought that at the end of the day, that the partners that I'd been working with, the chambers of commerces, the different business alliances, all of those types of things is, they liked working with Google, but they wanted the information. So I just had the plan of, I went back to them and say, I don't work for Google now, but the same relationship we have and I have the same information. So it was great to be able to take that, and I launched that and was able to come out of the gate with all of these contacts and then just build that.
So just to pause for a second, because you've been absolutely given us a ton of phenomenal information on how this came about. And there's some wolves in a minute we're going to talk about. But this is a point to be made in the business world. Those contacts that you had, right? Of course, Google had its reputation, its size, its gravity, pulling the whole world in. But the reality is, Ben, is that those people connected with you.
Correct.
They connected with you. And you were leveraging the Google platform and everything they had done, but what they really enjoyed was connecting with you because they trusted you. You could explain it in simple terms, and you could prove to them that, listen, this is valuable. This isn't just a cutting edge trend. You can monetize this. You can monetize this technology, this phenomena, and you do it in a very explainable way, and you put people at ease. And so you knew that, right? Part of a little bit of entrepreneurship and being a small business owner, I don't want to call it arrogance, but you have to acknowledge your talents without going around bragging to people. But I think in that inner voice, it's okay to say, listen, I'm good at this. I'm damn good at it. I know I am. Because I've interacted with people who are mediocre, and I've seen the effect I've had on my clients. So I know I'm good, right? And that's okay. It's a fine line between humility and confidence, right? You don't want to be cocky and arrogant and be a pain to be around, but you have to have that inner voice that tells you, Ben, listen, you're good. Go out and do your stuff, right? So all of that is excellent, and it leads into what I call these startup wolves, which I'm going to jump around a little bit, but one of them is when you start a business, I call it the credibility wolf. Now, clearly, in your case, the credibility wolf, I think, was tamed much easier than maybe a lot of other small business owners where you're an employee and you know your boss is relatively incompetent and I know I can do it better. And maybe you can, but the market doesn't know that. And so in your case, as I hear you speak, to a certain degree, you had established your credibility in the market via Google. So they knew that you were good and they knew what you were doing. But at the same time, as I listened to your story, if I'm a potential client of yours back in the day in the startup, my response would be, Ben, we think the world of you. You're good at what you do. But really, we were dealing with Google, and they have large resources. So how do we know that if we jump on board with you, that you're going to have the resources and the time for us, right? So how did you do that with these initial clients?
Yeah, you're right, though. I think I had a little bit of head start, Megan, or a little bit more of that equity kind of built up than most. But at the end of the day, you still need to prove it. And I think that it was developing things in a way that I could, again, prove that to people. So like one way that I did that was like workshops and webinars came later, but essentially putting on workshops to continuously essentially teach these things. Every time I'm not only potentially creating a potential client, a potential connection, colleague, but I'm also cementing myself and proving that I know what I'm talking about and then showing some results of what we've gotten. And so I think that was like really kind of the catalyst for exactly doing that, because the doors might open a little bit easier with Google, but at the end of the day, no matter what doors are open, you still then got to close them behind you. And so I think that was one of the biggest ways that I had to do that. And it was a little bit going back to, I remember even mentors telling me that you're doing this all wrong with workshops because you're giving all this information away. That's not how you do it stuff like that. And so that's actually where that came from, is I was told there, and I just thought, I was like, no, I think this.
You went against the grain with that. That's a point that has to be made. So let's just stop for a second, and I'm going to interrupt you along the way, because once again, we're trying to disseminate some wisdom and some nuggets of experience, right? So here's one. Here's what happened there, okay? This is called the power of intuition. So you had people, experienced business owners, so-called mentors, and I'm sure they had their best interests at heart. They weren't trying to sabotage you. But in the old school realm, it's the old fishing mentality. Don't ever tell anybody where you caught the fish, because there'll be 17 boats there the next day, right? But in the world that you live in, that mentality doesn't work everywhere, but it does work here. It works in this industry that you're in, because what you're really saying is, listen, I'm going to give all this stuff for free. Come here, and I'm going to teach you. Theoretically, you could just run with this and never see me again. Or I'll get you interested enough in this where you're going to call me because you want me to implement this. And that's where I think your mentors missed the boat on this. You knew that, right? You trusted your intuition. So that's huge. That's an excellent point. I love that.
Yeah. And I think that was like, you talk about intuition. I think that was like, honestly, one of the first times of starting to really understand what that gut feeling is, or what that intuition is from there. And to go off what you're talking about, like it was the whole concept of, If I show you how to do this, again, like kind of the fishing analogy, I'll show you where I fish, but I still have enough confidence in myself that I can still get you the best fish, or you might have some success, but you're going to probably want to ask me a few more things so that I can help you there too.
Or you're going to want to get in Ben's boat.
Correct.
And that's the best way. Just hop right in. Let him rig the tackle for you.
Exactly. And say, and have a good time and there. And so it's really having that confidence. I think that was like really the first time that I truly was like, again, like really trusting yourself. And because going back to what you're talking about is the model back then was charging for workshops, doing this, almost always a sales pitch type of thing. And it just,
listen, this is brilliant stuff. I can testify to some of that I did early on in my Indian gaming development days. I've done a lot of it with MRD. I'll have potential clients call me, and I'll talk myself out of business sometimes. I'll say, listen, you can get this done cheaper here, or follow this advice, and you don't need to hire me. And people will call me back 6 months, a year later. They're like, I really appreciated you being honest about this and not trying to hard sell me, and now I want to hire you.
Yep.
Why? It's that trust. In the service industry, you cannot earn their trust. You have nothing.
Yep.
Right.
And that's really what those workshops did. I've had competitors come to them. I've had Target Corp. I've had Health Partners. Some of these big kind of companies send people to our workshops to learn. And you talked about the trust. I think it's the whole Miracle on 34th Street type of mentality that just because we didn't have this here at Macy's, I can still now be a resource and I'm a differentiating kind of factor. And you build that trust because eventually somebody most often is going to need something that may not be right now, but it's that whole thing of building those relationships of what could come down the path.
So Ben, I really appreciate the ground that we've covered in this first podcast with you. And we've talked about your upbringing, your personal background, the time that you spent at Google and the skills you acquired with that little company. We talked about the formation of SKOL. It was fascinating how you took the leap. And I think most importantly, we talked about your pet pig, which was definitely the highlight of this first podcast with Ben Theis and SKOL. We've run out of time. I think we're going to pick this up again in another podcast, and we want to dig into the startup wolves, the growth wolves, the chaos wolves, and some of the other challenges that you've had as SKOL got off the ground. But thank you very much. This has been fascinating. We at Slaughter Cheap appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you next time.